Welcome, everybody, to the Cone of Shame Veterinary Podcast. I am your host, Dr. Andy Roark. Guys, I got a good one. I am here today with Dr. Stacy Anderson. She is the Dean at the Lincoln Memorial University College of Veterinary Medicine, and more importantly for today's purposes, she is the president of COWBEL, which is an acronym, Consortium on Workplace-Based Education and Learning. That's what it is. And so she is the president of COWBEL, and they are kind of at the vanguard of the distributive model of education. Now, if you listen to the podcast for any amount of time, you know that I am kind of an education nerd. My wife is a college professor. I really love pedagogy. I love the science of teaching and learning. It's kind of my jam. It's a lot of what I do in my job as an educator. And so anyway, I pay a lot of attention to this, and so I have questions about the distributive model, and I get into them with Stacy, and so we talk a little bit about concerns that people sort of commonly have, and then I have two specific ones. One is around capacity, and the other is around the desire of practices to continue to participate over the long term in a model of education like this. There's a reason that people don't stay on Tinder for a long time, and that's what we talk about. I don't think she saw that one coming, but that was my concern. It's a really fun one. I think you'll enjoy it. Let's get into it.
This is your show. We're glad you're here. We want to help you in your veterinary career. Welcome to the Cone of Shame with Dr. Andy Roark.
Welcome to the podcast, Dr. Stacy Anderson. How are you, my friend?
I'm very well.
It's good to have you on the podcast. You and I met a number of years ago. You are the dean at LMU College of Veterinary Medicine, and we met when I got to come up there and speak, and it's just an absolutely beautiful campus up in the Cumberland Gap. I am a big fan of the Appalachian Mountains, and so I'm just taken with the campus. You are also the president of COWBEL, which is what I wanted to sort of talk to you about today. So I've got an interest in what veterinary education looks like, and the distributive model of that education is something I've really kind of wanted to get my head around. And I think that you are a fantastic person to talk about that. Can you tell me, can you start off and just tell us about what COWBEL is for most people who don't know?
COWBEL is the Consortium on Workplace-Based Education and Learning. It's a consortium that was formed, I think it was around 2018, 2019, kind of when LMU was a developing school, and we joined forces with other distributive programs, which at that point was not very many. So Western University of Health Sciences, their College of Veterinary Medicine, and University of Calgary were really the only two accredited programs at that point. And so, COWBEL formed from kind of those three starting schools, and then as new distributive schools have come on board, then they've joined us. Additionally, though, we have actually quite a few programs that are not distributive that are part of COWBEL, because the goal of the organization is to create best practices for community or distributive clinical education. So many veterinary programs use some amount of rotations that are not at the teaching hospital. We've been excited to welcome those kind of programs along with the fully distributive models.
I remember when Western opened up and they were going to use a distributive model, and people's heads exploded.
Yeah.
Just the idea that there was not a teaching hospital, like not even a small one, that was so sort of paradigm shifting at the time. And of course, there was a lot of concern about the quality of the graduates that they would turn out. And that has been soundly shown to have not been an issue at all. Western graduates are fantastic doctors as a group. But I still remember when that sort of happened. Can you define the term distributive model so that everybody knows what we're talking about when we use that?
For sure. So distributive basically means education that happens away from the parent institution. So there's different terminology that you'll see in the literature and out in the space. So community-based is another term that you'll see. There's a debate if it's distributed or distributive, that kind of thing. But yeah,
I've seen it both ways, and I've used both terms, and I don't know which one is right. So when I connected with you, I saw that you use distributive, and I was like, if anyone should know, it should be Stacy.
Yeah, you could use them, really interchangeably. But yeah, it just basically means clinical education that's not happening at a teaching institute.
So imagine that this system is just working so well. Like, you've got a distributive model and it is fantastic. What does that look like? Talk us through, like, the actual practice. You say this system is firing on all cylinders. what is the experience? Let's just say the experience from the student. What does that look like?
Yeah, for the student experience, what they're looking for is really developing a clinical year that's going to meet their career goals. I think all of our programs have some core rotations. A lot of it is left to electives and career-focused type rotations so that they can really graduate and be ready to be a day one ready practitioner. And so we work really closely with students to create their clinical year schedule that is going to meet those goals. They also, in this type of education, can travel around, so they can be in different parts of the country, even different parts of the world if they want. So it gives them kind of a unique perspective on the veterinary medicine field in general, because they can see it from so many different angles.
And then what does it look like for the veterinary practices that the students are going to?
For the veterinary practices, we hope that they have value from our students. So one thing that they report is they have to step up their game a little bit, right? When you have a student that's asking questions, you have to kind of remember your medicine a little bit better. They bring, kind of a higher level of practice potentially to clinics. Also, many of our practitioners really love to teach and give back to the profession. So it's a fantastic way for them to do it. It's a great recruiting tool. So many of our graduates go work at practices that they rotated through, while they're on rotations. And I think it allows practitioners to have a vested interest in veterinary education, which is kind of a unique idea.
How many schools right now are using the distributive model? And then how many are they going to be in, 5 or 10 years? I know we have a lot that are sort of coming online, and that seems to be the model of choice.
That's exactly right. So there are currently 6 schools that are either accredited or provisionally accredited. And as far as the number coming online, that seems to change every day. I believe it's up to like 13-ish. And yes, you're correct. Most of the new schools are distributive in some ways. And a lot of them have variations. And even within the current accredited or provisionally accredited, we all have a different mix of how much we distribute, how much we have rotations on our campuses. So for example, LMU has a ambulatory rotation that is delivered out of our Virginia campus. So, we're not fully distributive, but it's definitely the trend for new programs going forward.
What are the most common concerns that you actually, let me just stop here and say, I really love the idea of people getting hands-on practical experience. Like, I really believe that the job of veterinary schools is to turn out competent doctors that can get to work and have a skill set that supports themselves, not turning out people who need 3 more years of development before they feel comfortable doing the job that they, paid to go to that school to be able to do. And so I really like a lot of things about this. As someone who did not shine on the academic part of medicine, but definitely much more in the relationship hands-on part, I'm a big fan of this. I know that my colleagues have some concerns. What are the most sort of common concerns about the distributive model that you hear when you engage with practitioners?
I think the most common thing that I hear is just the question around quality control. I think many of us, I went to Iowa State, so traditional program, great program. And many of us did externships, right, during our clinical year. So we were able to go to a practice outside of the teaching hospital and get some experience. And I think a lot of the perception in the profession is that that's what's happening in the distributive model. Like, they're just doing a bunch of externships that are very, really not regulated, not overseen, not quality controlled. And so I think that in order to understand the distributive model, you have to understand how much quality control goes into the oversight of that clinical education, even though it's not happening at a teaching hospital.
So far, there has really not been any ill effects or consequences when we look at like NAVLE pass rates in terms of people going through distributive models. Is that true?
That is true, yeah. Yeah, the NAVLE pass rates, I looked them up before this. So just so everyone knows, NAVLE pass rates are available on every school's website. Like, it's a requirement from the COE. And so of the 6 provisionally accredited or accredited programs, 4 out of the 6 have average or above average NAVLE pass rates. I think, we're not seeing any impact on that. At LMU, we do a lot to prepare students for the NAVLE. Don't get me wrong. I think it is stressful for students who are out in the field to maybe get as much dedicated time to prepare for the NAVLE. So we've built that into our curriculum so that we can prepare them. And many of the distributive schools have done that, as along with new schools are seeing that as well.
There's two questions that I really have that I wanted to sort of unpack with you. And the first one is around capacity, where I look at Western and I go, this system seems to work from what I can tell. And I know Western grads and I've been impressed with them, and like the system seems to work. My question is really around capacity in general, right? So if we've got 6 or 7 schools, say now, that are using the distributive model, and then we triple that number, right? As we add, 12 or 13 more, a system that could support, say, 5 schools that are sort of farming out their students, that doesn't mean that 15 schools could farm their students necessarily out. Talk to me about that. Do you have a concern around capacity? Like, I don't know how you necessarily measure it, but is there concerns that you say the institutions that are willing to take these students or will deliver this level of education, they're not infinite? So help me get my head around that.
Sure. And that is actually something that COWBEL is a great resource for the distributive program. So we're actively working to harmonize processes and working with clinical sites to make them able to accommodate more students. I will say that most distributive programs only are sending 1 or 2 students to a site at a time. So already, it's not like a traditional rotation or a rotation at a traditional hospital where you're going to see 5 to 10 students on a rotation at once. The biggest limitation for capacity that I see, and this actually is an issue for other areas of our profession, including resident training, is exposure to specialty practices, because that is the more limited resource, I would say, with type of practice. As far as numbers of practices, I'll relate back to LMU. We have over 500 practices in our repertoire of practices that students can choose from. Now, only around 100 of them are considered core rotations or core sites where students can take core rotations, but there is a ton of capacity in the field as long as, practices are willing to participate. I don't think it's going to be a problem in the near term at this point. So, and even LMU is spread out all over the country. Other new programs are trying to stay a little more concentrated, closer to their home base. Like University of Arizona is a great example, and Texas Tech, actually, both of them. Most of their rotations are within, like for Texas Tech in Texas, maybe into New Mexico, like nearby. Same thing with Arizona, right? They're not spread out all over the country. So I feel like there's an immense capacity for it. And I think it would take maybe like 30, 50 programs to really put a lot of strain on it.
Okay.
Other than maybe the specialty practices. But that, again, that's an issue for other areas too. So
talk to me a little bit. I know you have insight into LMU specifically. I don't know how familiar you are with sort of the curriculums in all of the other schools and stuff. But so generally, talk to me about sort of how many rotations your average veterinary student kind of needs before they come out. It's not one rotation, obviously. There's going to be a certain number per year. Is there kind of a general ballpark standard in that? And then can you speak, is there a breakdown between what generally, and I know it's going to vary with the school, but generally, how many of these are general practice and how many need to be under, a specialist supervision? Help me understand what those numbers look like.
Sure. The COE actually sets the minimum amount of clinical education weeks. So it's at 40 weeks at the moment. So every student has to at least have 40 weeks of clinical education, regardless of the type of program that they're in. Beyond that, the only thing that the programs really have to cover in their clinical training are things that are in the curriculum standard for the COE. So some things that are called out, like our necropsy, ambulatory rotation. But beyond that, like how much time they need to spend in specialty practice versus general practice, that's really left up to the school. And most of us are working off of some type of mission or, focus on what type of graduates we want to produce. So for example, LMU very much is focused on mixed animal, hopefully rural type practitioners. And so, we allow our students they really actually only have to do 1 rotation through a specialty hospital. It's a 4-week rotation. And then the rest of it could be general practice type rotations. Now, if a student, again, going back to the career focus aspect, if a student wants to specialize, they're going to pick up more specialty rotations. But as far as the core curriculum, other than what is needed to meet COE requirements and then whatever mission the college is on, it's pretty much left to the discretion of the college.
Okay, I just didn't know if there was a sort of a formal set amount of the number of rotations that have to be specialist-led versus GP-led.
No, not at this point.
You mentioned earlier the desire of practices to participate. So it was like there's capacity as long as the practices want to participate, and that's my second concern. So I have this idea, and I want you to hate it, and I want you to tell me why I'm wrong. But I have this idea that kind of the distributive model is kind of like a weird version of Tinder, where it's like a dating app, right? If the driver for a lot of practices, boy, we'd really like to hire veterinarians or have veterinarians who want to be here. Then it's kind of like Tinder, where you always pick up the tab. So you're always paying for the date, but you have this. And again, I was never on Tinder. Tinder didn't exist when I was single. But my understanding is generally people are on Tinder for a while, and then you either get matched and you're like, I'm out. Like I have the relationships that I need and I'm out. Or you get fed up, especially if you're always picking up the tab for the date, and you'd be like, this is not working for me. And then you bounce out. There's not a lot of people who get on Tinder and stay on Tinder for a long time, is my understanding. And so is that true in your experience, not about Tinder, but about distributive model? Is that true in your experience with LMU? Do you have practices that come in and they say they do it for a while and they kind of step back out? What is the lifespan of a participating hospital kind of in your experience?
I think it's not quite like Tinder, but that is an interesting analogy.
Yeah, I came up with that myself, in case you didn't know. That's an Andy Roark exclusive there.
The only part of Tinder that I will say applies is that many practices do enter into these programs to attract students to come to their practice, and there's probably a little bit of dating that goes on, right?
I mean, seems that way to me.
Yeah. So yeah, that is part of it. But as far as practices coming and going, there's no I guess set pattern for it. We recruit practices. So when we started, so I can kind of go back with LMU because it's a newer school. When we started, we were recruiting practices like crazy, right? We were we needed these practices, and then we got to this point where we had too many practices, and so we've actually, in the last 3 years, been reducing our number significantly because we had too many. Beyond that, what ends up happening is it's almost kind of almost more like a job fit, right? So practices they'll take students, and maybe they sign up for the first time, they take students, they love it or they don't love it, right? And so most of the time they're only going to stay in if they really love having the students and the students are adding value in some capacity. There's all sorts of different values like we talked about that the student can add, and that's what makes them stay. Yeah, I mean, beyond that, we do have quality control in place as well. So if a practice is not behaving well or not we get student feedback constantly from these practices. If they're not a good site for teaching our students, then we'll take them out that way, and vice versa. So we've had students that, unfortunately, when you have hundreds of students, you're going to have some that are not maybe the best behaving students. And unfortunately, sometimes that causes practices to want to leave the system as well. But for the most part, especially once a practice is established and has a group of doctors and staff that really are bought into education, they're going to stay. So that's kind of where that practice needs to decide that they're going to be.
When you think about the practices that are the most popular with your students, I know you've got some really popular ones that are probably challenging to get spots in. Stacy, what are the sort of the defining characteristics that you see in those practices that are really sought after by students?
The defining characteristic is letting the students have hands-on training.
Letting the students do stuff. Okay.
Yeah. So if the students go there and can do things, then they're very happy. And then second place to that would be mentorship, right? That they have the clinical educators are invested in the students' education and making sure that they're really having a great learning experience. Those two things make the practice, just super desirable to students.
That's fantastic. That's good to know. It's always a good reminder. I think everybody, when we take vet students, we want them to have a good experience. It's good to be reminded of what's most important to them. Dr. Stacy Anderson, thank you so much for being here. Where can people learn more about COWBEL, first of all? If they would like to sort of know more about the organization, where do they go?
So COWBEL has a website. It's cowbel.org, COWBEL.org. And then they're also on LinkedIn. So great and pretty active on LinkedIn. So you can follow along with what COWBEL is doing and what the schools who are members of COWBEL are doing at that place.
Okay. And then where can people find you online? I mean, you're doing lots of things. You wear many hats. I'm like, yeah, how do I keep up with your adventures?
Yeah, most of my adventures, you can follow me on LinkedIn. I don't know what my handle is, but
I'll find it. I'll find it. I'll put it in the show notes. Yeah.
Stacy Anderson LMU, something like that. Search. And Lincoln Memorial puts out a lot of information on their website and LinkedIn and social media. And that's where you can find us.
Well, thank you so much for being here. Guys, thanks for tuning in and listening, everybody. Take care of yourselves, gang. All right, guys, that's what I got. Thanks for being here. Thanks to Stacy for being here as well. Gang, I appreciate you. If you enjoyed the podcast, please share it. Please share it. Hit that like, subscribe button. Whatever the positive feedback thing is where you're getting this podcast, I would appreciate if you did that. It really helps the podcast out. It means a lot to me personally. I always love it when I see stuff getting shared across the interwebs. So anyway, guys, thanks for being here. Take care. I'll talk to you later.